This is the Doogee Mix, a bit of a runaway success, a bit of a surprise hit. Today's a good day, because today we have the Mix 2, the phone's direct successor. And when we compare both of these phones side by side, it reveals an interesting truth about the company behind them. So let's get right into it. Taking a look around the box of the phone, it's pretty unremarkable presentation. In the top right, we have a little sticker which tells us that we have the 6GB RAM, 64GB ROM model, which sounds pretty impressive. Now, if you've seen our unboxing of the original Doogee Mix, this box over here actually isn't as impressive, which seems unusual, but if you stick around, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. Alright, so the Doogee Mix 2 inside the box comes with a plastic screen protector, a screen cleaning cloth, and a hard protective case. And it's pretty well finished, but you do notice almost straight away just how sharp the phone's edges are. It also comes with a 3.5mm headphone jack adapter, of course not needed in the original phone because that had a headphone jack. An interesting side note here, something I couldn't obviously help noticing when I was unboxing the phone, is that wherever I was moving the box over my table, it was leaving a very difficult to remove mark. Something to bear in mind. Alright, so upon first taking the Mix 2 out of its protective packaging, there are so many things to say. This is such an interesting, striking, controversial kind of phone. But the first thing which really leapt out at me when I saw it was how much it looks like the original OnePlus One in terms of its general shape. It is obviously a more recent and hardware-wise more up-to-date device, but the fact that it ended up looking like this shows that there perhaps was a bit of a problem in the design room. Alright, comparing it against the original Mix, that was by no means a light phone, but the Mix 2 is seriously heavy. On top of that, the 7.95mm thickness of the original Mix has been expanded to 8.6, somewhat excusable due to the large battery, 4060mAh over here, but at the same time it really is treading on thin ice. The fingerprint scanner has been moved from the front of the phone on the original Mix to the rear on the Mix 2. And holding these two phones side by side, you start to realise they look nothing alike. The colours are slightly off, the camera arrangements are completely different, and whilst the original Mix had this plain blue aesthetic to it, the Mix 2 has a colour-changing purple frame. Not a bad thing, just very different. The finishes that both phones have running around their sides and the speaker grills are in stark contrast. Now of course, when you go from a first-gen phone to a second-gen phone, you expect evolution. But the problem is that these two phones here, they barely even share resemblance. Aside from the logo on the back and a couple of wallpapers that both of them have in common, you couldn't tell they were from the same company. And this leads us to two potential conclusions. Number one, Doogee hasn't done a very good job of creating a brand identity. Or number two, the original Doogee Mix was a surprise success. People weren't expecting it to do nearly as well as it did. It was picked up by media, journalists, YouTubers, and it really took off. And it's very possible that the Mix 2 was actually meant to be a completely different smartphone altogether. And at the last minute, in order to continue to ride off the success of the original, they changed it to a Mix phone. And you can tell this wasn't meant to be a Mix phone, it doesn't even have the same form factor. Every one of these Mix devices was somewhat of an imitation of Xiaomi's Mi Mix, whereas the Doogee Mix 2 bears no resemblance whatsoever. It's not all bad news though, the Mix 2 has a 6-inch 2160x1080p LCD, compared to the original Mix's 5.5-inch 720p Super AMOLED. And this alone gives us a lot to talk about. As they have now gone for an LCD, the colours aren't as vivid, but they're slightly more accurate and a little bit less green. Viewing angles are better, and the higher resolution means text is way sharper and icons look a lot clearer. The difference is noticeable to say the least. The extra screen space on the Mix 2 has essentially been added to the top and the bottom, making this a longer 18:9 aspect ratio. Whilst the Android version has only gone up from Android 7.0 to 7.1, the UI has changed quite drastically. It's become simpler, less of a heavy skin, and almost in every way for the better. The software has also become a lot more stock, even the app drawer now will swipe up in the same way it does on the Pixel phones. In terms of power, both of these phones are pretty good, but not amazing. We've got 6GB of RAM combined with a Helio P25, which offers decent performance. The Mix 2 benchmarks higher, but because of just how many more pixels there are on screen, it actually performs less well in high-end graphics situations. Now, one of my main complaints about the original Mix was that fake dual camera. And even though this time around everything has been rearranged, it looks completely different, one thing has remained the same. That top sensor does absolutely nothing. The imaging capabilities in general though are a little bit better. Of course you have no dual camera features here, but shutter time is a little bit faster, and the pictures just come out a little bit more detailed. Aside from that though, the Mix 2, I gotta say, is a complete sidestep. It is a confusing move from a confusing company. It's not a disaster of a phone, it's not the worst way to spend your money, but the problem is, in the 6 months between this phone's release and the last phone's release, the market has got a lot more competitive. And amidst this competition, the company has gone ahead and produced a successor smartphone, which is barely better in any way. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching, I really hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.